Good morning, YouTube. I am continuing my series on testing for an airframe and power plant certificate. Okay, I've talked in previous videos about why you should get an AMP. I talked about the two justifications for getting an AMP, either practical experience working in the aviation industry or going through a FAR Part 147 school. In this video, I'm going to talk about what you should be studying for your test. Okay, so the first distinction I want to make is that there are actually two separate certificates for an airframe and power plant. There is an airframe certificate and a power plant certificate. You can have one or the other. You don't necessarily have to have both, but you do have to have the general and an airframe or the general and the power plant. So I'm going to do a whole video on the testing process and what the tests look like, the paperwork you need to fill out, who you need to call, where you need to go. But you will start by taking 3 written tests, a general written test, and an airframe written test, and a power plant written test. Now, like I said, you can have just a power plant certificate or just an airframe certificate, but you'd have to take a general written and an airframe written, or a general written and a power plant written. The thing that stays the same there is you have to take the general written. Before you're allowed to take an OMP, an oral and practical exam, you will have to take both your general written and your airframe written to be able to take the airframe oral and practical. So, the first book I'm going to show you is the Airframe and Power Plant Mechanics 2022 General Test Guide. This probably got updated to 2023. This is for use with FAA H8083-30A ATB books. So, the FAA actually publishes, and I've got a whole stack of these in my office, the FAA actually publishes 4 textbooks for you to use. A general textbook, an airframe textbook, a power plant textbook, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, and Volume 5, right? These written questions and oral questions correlate to those FAA textbooks. You can buy them online. You can get them from Amazon. You can get them from Aircraft Spruce. You can buy them in paperback, or you can go to the FAA website and download them for free. So one of the things I'm going to do in this video, if you look down in the description, I'm going to try to put links to as many of these things as I can find so that you're not digging around looking for them. But the first thing is your general test guide. Now, if you open it up, all it has in here is just one question after another, multiple choice, like which minimum license is required to perform a 100-hour inspection. And then it gives you choice A, B, and C. Usually on the bottom or on the next page, it gives you the answer and the reason. Now, you can download an app like Prepware, or you can sign in online on your computer and download online Prepware and use Prepware to get a subscription to have access to all of the written questions in the general bank, the airframe bank, and the power plant bank. Typically, that's what I suggest, is getting the app. It will allow you to break it down by each section, FARs, shop practices, ground ops, so on and so forth, and study one section at a time until you can get an A on, or 100 on every section. Basic Electricity's got like 116 questions. There's, I want to say, 800 something questions total in the general question bank. There's 1,600 questions total in the power plant and 1,600 in the airframe. So there's a lot of questions to study, and this will take you some time. But if you download Prepware, or if you even use the book, you'll be able to memorize the question and the correct answer. Only read the question and only read the correct answer. And if you want, read the justification so that you understand why it's the correct answer. But you do that over and over and over and over again, one section at a time, until you can get 100 on every section, and then you go back and you take the whole thing. You do that over and over and over again until you're consistently getting an 80 or a 90. Now, the FAA did say at the most recent ATEC meeting that they are no longer going to publish all of the mechanics questions. They're still publishing most of them, but do not be surprised when you go sit down at a testing center, which is, I will cover in another video. You sit down at a testing center and you get questions that are either reworded or use the same figure, but the question is different. Maybe the answer is now the question, and the question is now the correct answer, okay? So you do need to understand the material. Just memorizing question and answer is not going to get you a pass like it used to in the past. So you've made it past your written. You took a general written, you took an airframe written, you used these 2 books to study those questions. You passed both those writtens, and now you're clear to take the oral and practical exam with a DME. Well, this book is kind of nice. It actually has at the back of each of the sections a typical oral questions guide, okay? And it will say things like, on aircraft with steerable nose wheel and locking scissors to set full swivel, the locking device must be yada, 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 yada. And that is a question that the DME may ask you. Here's the thing. The FAA has put out a couple of different question banks that DMEs can use. Or your oral and practical DME examiner can choose to make his own questions. Now, I don't know about y'all, but like electricity, I'm kind of lazy, and I don't want to make my own question bank. If the FAA gives me something to use, I'm probably going to use that, which is what most your DMEs do. Even Prepware, I don't know if the app does it, I know it does on the computer, on the website, if you go to prepware.com. If you go to study and open the study guide, even Prepware will open your typical oral questions and give you a list of typical practical projects, for which you could also buy this book. This is just another book. This is a little bit older one, but it's your oral and practical exam guide. As you flip through here, it has all of your typical oral questions and answers, what the DME may ask, and then it has typical practical projects that you may do. Why that's important. If you're looking at a practical project like determine the distance between the forward and aft center of gravity limits for a helicopter, and you have no idea how to do that, you might want to go open the textbook and read through the textbook on how you would do that so that you understand it. When I graduated my FAR Part 147 school, it took me about 6 weeks total to study and get my licensure. I did general and airframe first. I did Powerplant written, and then I studied for about 3 to 4 weeks, and I went and took the OMP. Okay. Now, this is all one company called ASA. There is another company out there called Jepson. Depending on which DME you go to, they may choose to use the Jepson oral questions or the ASA oral questions. They're the same question, just worded differently. For example, ASA may say, what is the most common type of wood used in aircraft structures? The answer would be Sitka spruce. Jepson may say, the most common type of wood used in aircraft structures is Sitka spruce. It's the same question, it's just shortened or reworded differently. And Jepson, some of their answers are a little more easy to understand. Some of their answers are a lot more condensed than the Prepware answers. So I'm going to link both ASA's questions and answers and also Jepson's question and answers and workbooks. And I'm only going to include the books of questions and what questions you should study for your test. I will put a link for the FAA published textbooks so that you know where to go to find the textbooks, but I wouldn't buy those personally. I would just download them from the FAA website, which is free. Download them from the FAA website and then reference back to them when you have questions. At any rate, I hope all of this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comment. Send me an email on my homepage for my channel. I'll try to respond. I don't do great at checking emails, so I apologize for that in advance. If you thought this information was helpful, leave us a like, leave us a comment, subscribe, and as always, be easy.